Okay, welcome to your final research methods lesson here. We've been looking at the the theory behind research and sociology in the last couple of weeks, and so this is the final one, looking at whether sociology can be value-free. So when you're talking about value freedom, we're going to have a couple of key terms here. They've got a few different meanings, but in this context, we're talking about objectivity, being, can the researcher be completely unbiased when they do their research? Can they separate their own personal opinions and thoughts and beliefs and assumptions about whatever it is they're researching from the research and the results? Or are their conclusions, is their research kind of impacted by their own personal biases? And if it is, then they're being subjective. And the whole debate, the whole kind of question here is whether or not it is possible to be completely unbiased, to be completely detached from your own personal beliefs when you're doing sociological research. So we'll have a look at some of the theoretical approaches to this now. So before we go into the kind of details of these different approaches, I just want you to be aware that there are different kind of sides to the debate. And some of these guys you've already learned, so it should be quite easy to kind of repeat what we've got, revise what we've got already, and just apply it to this question of value freedom or objectivity. But there are three main areas to this debate. Firstly, that sociology can and should be value-free. Secondly, that it's just not possible. There is no way of taking the researcher bias out of sociological research. And then the final one, which you're probably going to use more as evaluation and conclusion, is the idea that, well, actually, they shouldn't even try and be value-free. Sociologists shouldn't even try to be unbiased. They need to be biased for a particular reason. And we'll have a look at those later on. So to start with, we've got our positivists. Now, we already know a bit about positivists from the last couple of weeks. We know Durkheim was a key positivist thinker when he was founding sociology as a founding father. He was trying to be a positivist because he liked the idea of the kind of natural sciences and wanted sociology to be like that. And because he believes society is external to people, because he believes that social facts, these laws of cause and effect, exist, he thinks that means that you can study sociology in a completely detached and unbiased way. You can completely separate your own personal beliefs and biases from the research, just like biology, chemistry, physics does. So when you're trying to discover and prove these social facts, you're largely using quantitative data, which you can't really influence and kind of misinterpret using your own biases, according to Durkheim. And therefore, it can be done in a completely detached, unbiased way, and sociology can and should be value-free. So if you were doing your essay on value freedom, one of your main paragraphs is going to be a Durkheim, a positivist approach. And what I'm trying to do here is give you some evaluation to either support or criticize that positivist approach. Now, the content here, there's not as much detail perhaps, and so you wouldn't want your own paragraphs on these thinkers necessarily. They're probably better used to kind of support or criticize, and you can do both of those in the same paragraph. You want to support or criticize what the positivists are saying. Now, Weber was, again, one of the founding fathers of sociology, and he supports the positivist view with a slight kind of addendum, a slight technical hitch. He says you can absolutely do research in a kind of objective, unbiased, scientific way, but only once you've chosen the topic. He says you can't just pick a part of society at random to research. You'll have to use your kind of own values and beliefs and biases of what's worth studying, what it's worth actually looking into and taking the time to research. And so that's why he says you've got to pick your topic, but then you can kind of detach yourself from the research. Once you've picked the topic, you can detach yourself and you're able to do it in a scientific way. Now, on the other hand, you've got some postmodernists who would disagree with the positivists, with Durkheim. And they say that actually, this is a standard postmodern point, all knowledge, it's a social construction. There's no objective truth. There's no universal truth. There's nothing that is true for everyone for all time. And so anyone who's saying, well, actually, we're value free, what the postmodernists think is they're just trying to say that their truth is better than everyone else's truth. And in postmodernity, that just doesn't work. There are no truths that are better than any other truth. Everybody's truth is equal. And so the postmodernists would say Durkheim's idea, the positivist idea, doesn't work. You can't be value free. You can't claim your truth is better than other truths. All right, so now let's look at the interpretivists. Now you'll remember the interpretivists have the kind of exact opposite approach to society and view of society and research to what the positivists believe. So instead of seeing society as external, something separate from people, they see it as something internal. It's something that's shaped and made by the way that we act and kind of interact in the way that we think and the meanings that we give situations. So if that's how society works, like the interpretivists believe, if society is internal to people, if it's part of us, if it's a social construct, then the way to do research is you've got to gain detailed qualitative data. You've got to get a lot of depth and detail in what people think, what they mean, and why they act the way that they do. And all of that, anything looking at kind of qualitative data, is going to involve subjective interpretations of why they do what they do, why they think or act the way that they do. There's no objectivity there. It's all going to involve kind of personal opinions, personal thoughts and biases. And interpreters argue that you just can't keep values out. These personal opinions, these personal values or biases, there's just no way of keeping them out. You'll use them to pick your topic, you'll use them to plan your research, you'll use them to analyze your results. And even if you were somehow able to keep kind of values out of your research, the people you're researching will put them straight back in. Like even if the experimenter or the researcher manages to stay relatively unbiased, the subjects of the research won't, because life is full of values. Life is full of assumptions and beliefs. And so they basically say it's just not possible. You can't keep values out of sociological research. And they kind of directly criticize the positivists as well. Even if you're doing quantitative data, you still use values to decide what to ask about, what to research, how to do it. And so sociology is just not possible. It can't be value free. Now, here we're at the point where we need to, again, you've got a main paragraph on positivism, and you've got some people that you can use to kind of support or criticize that. Then your next main paragraph is interpretivism, and we're going to use Thomas Kuhn to evaluate, support what the interpretivists are saying. Now Kuhn argues about paradigms, and you should have already kind of understood that. We've looked at that before. This idea of this world view that everyone's kind of a part of, particularly he was talking about science. It's called a paradigm, and then what happens is there's stuff that doesn't fit that worldview, doesn't fit that way of seeing the universe or whatever else. And eventually there's so much evidence that there's a paradigm shift or a scientific revolution, and we've got a new paradigm that everyone then buys into. And basically scientists use paradigms according to Kuhn, sociologists use paradigms according to Kuhn. People in general will use paradigms to understand everything that goes on around them. And the bottom line is that paradigms are full of values. They're full of bias. They're full of assumptions that are not objective. They are entirely subjective. And so, like what the interpretivists are saying, it's just not possible to avoid using values, using personal beliefs, subjective beliefs, in sociological research. So Kuhn, really strong kind of support for what the interpretivists are saying there. All right, we've looked at the main kind of side saying sociology, it can be value free, it is value free, it's not biased, it's all objective with the positivists. And we've looked at the other side of the argument with the interpretivists saying that it's not possible at all to be completely unbiased and value free. There's always going to be opinions and beliefs and assumptions that get into the research. And now we're looking at a very different point. This is the argument that it doesn't really matter whether you can or can't. It doesn't matter whether it's possible to be value free. What matters is that actually you shouldn't even try. You shouldn't want to be value free. Sociology should be biased. And the feminists are a really good example of this. The feminists say that sociologists should make a value commitment. They should try to improve the lives of the groups of people that have largely been ignored or been largely been biased against in society, so the powerless groups in society, like women. And they make the point that for hundreds of years now, sociology has been male stream, so focused on men, done by men, about men, for the benefit of men. So male stream sociology, they like a little play on words, it's instead of the word mainstream. And they say this is a problem. Obviously, it's been biased towards men for too long. And now, rather than being neutral and unbiased, we need to go the other way. We need to be biased towards women so that we can actually do research that makes the lives, the real lives of women in society better. So feminists, they don't want to be objective. It's not, you shouldn't even try and be objective. You should be biased, but you should be biased towards the groups that have historically been seen as inferior, that have been treated as second-class citizens, and we need to make their lives better so society as a whole is better. Now, this argument, it can be really good for a conclusion or maybe evaluation of some of the other approaches. Really good point to make here. And when we do the theory topic, as part of your second year of sociology, we'll come back to this idea of male stream sociology and what's called the feminist methodology, the way that the feminists go about doing research. But there's an argument to start with for them now. Our final bit of content here, which again you can use to evaluate, so it supports what the feminists are saying, or maybe criticize either the positivists or the interpretivists, or you can use it as a conclusion. Our final bit of content comes from Becker, so the guy who did the labeling theory. Now he basically says the same thing that the feminists say, but he makes it much broader than just a gender issue of men and women. He talks about sociology should be biased, shouldn't even try to be kind of unbiased and value-free. It should be biased towards what he calls the underdogs. So the groups of people in society who have traditionally been the kind of powerless groups, the people who've been treated as inferior, who've had less privilege and less advantage in society. And he says we need to, like the feminists say, we need to work towards making their lives better, and that way society becomes more equal. And he's got a real issue with some of the sociologists who've done what they call value-free work, when they've been doing stuff that's been basically unethical. And he says that you can't hide behind this idea of value freedom to justify doing this questionable research. So, for example, there was some research done by tobacco companies who hired sociologists to basically find more ways to sell working class people cigarettes, to find more ways to sell them stuff that damages their lives and make money off of them. And the sociologists, when they were kind of saying, well, why are you doing this? This is helping very rich companies make more and more money off of people by selling them cigarettes, by selling them something that's going to damage them. They said, oh, we're just value free. We're unbiased. We're just doing objective research. And that was the defense that was given by these sociologists. And Becker says, you can't do that. That's just a way to try and justify this research, which is wrong. You shouldn't do that. The whole point of sociology is to make life better, and we really need to be looking after these powerless underdogs. We need to look after these people who've largely been downtrodden and considered as second rate. And so he says you need to be biased. You need to be biased towards the people that need the most help. And we need to actually use sociological research to make their lives better. Okay, very similar point to what the feminists say. So you could use it as support of that, or you could use it as a kind of overall conclusion to the question, should sociology be value-free? Can sociology be value-free? And actually go, well, you shouldn't even try. We need to use sociology to make the lives of underdogs, of powerless people, better. Okay, that is all your research methods content That's the last video you'll have on this. So hopefully that's all made sense, and if not, go back, watch the videos again, and eventually we'll get there, I think. All right, thank you very much.